I've been trying to call. I've been on my own for long enough. Maybe you can show me how to love. Maybe I'm going through withdrawals. You don't even have to do too much. You can turn me on with just a touch, baby. I look around and since city's cold and empty, no one's around to judge me. I can't see clearly when you're gone. And I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep right until I feel your touch. I said, ooh, I'm drowning in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, you're the one I trust. Cause I can see the sun light up the sky. So I hit the road and overdrive, baby. Hit the road and overdrive. The city's cold and empty. No one's around to judge me. I can't see clearly when you're gone. And I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep until I feel your heart touch. I said, ooh, I'm drowning in the night. Oh, when I'm like this, you're the one I trust. I'm coming back to let you know I can never say it on the phone. But when I never let you go this time, I said, ooh, I'm blinded by the lights. No, I can't sleep until I feel your touch. Feel free to be whoever you want to be. Feel free to dance, feel free to sing, just feel free. Feels like the world is picking on ya. Feels like it's picking on me. But trying to please everybody, that ain't no way to be. So many people try to get you to fit their mold. Woo! Woo! As Ric Flair would say, woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Tone Talk podcast. Bonus episode 77. Why a bonus episode? Why are we doing a bonus episode on a Tuesday? Well, I'll tell you why. Because big news coming out of Nashville, Tennessee. Last night, I jinxed it because I got on Twitter and I said, well, clearly we're not going to get an update tonight. And within hours of that tweet,
The news came through that the Tennessee Titans are indeed finalizing a deal to make Brian Callahan the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And I don't know if you've read all the articles from The Athletic and things like that, but this was their guy from the start. I'm telling you, it's obvious. Brian Callahan was the top choice for the Tennessee Titans from the word go. They sent the private jet. Did you guys read about this? Callahan was supposed to fly in to Nashville for his second interview. Flight got canceled because of the weather and all the craziness. They were going to reschedule, do the meeting on Zoom. I don't know. Miss Amy sent the private jet to get this fella and fly him to Nashville, Tennessee. She said, I ain't letting this man off the hook. He was supposed to have interviews with the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina Panthers today. Those interviews are canceled. She said, I ain't even letting you out of the building. There ain't gonna be no interview with Carolina. There ain't gonna be no interview with Atlanta. There ain't gonna be no interview with Dan Quinn later this week. Brian Callahan is the new head coach of the Tennessee Titans. And I'm telling you what, guys, I'm aware. I know that NFL off seasons can be crazy because usually once the off season begins for a team, you're going to have stuff like this, a new coach, new coordinators, a new GM, and every time fan bases get excited because they think that this head coach, this coordinator, this GM is going to be the one that takes us to the promised land. And some people would hear the way that I'm excited today and they would say, you know what? You're just saying that because you're a biased fan and it doesn't matter who they hire. You're going to think it's the greatest hire in the world. But if you've been listening to this podcast, particularly over the last couple of weeks, you would know that's not true. There are a number of people that the Titans interviewed that if they would have hired, I would have come on in here and I would have been like, this is a disaster. The reason is yesterday. Said, hey, if they hired Dan Quinn, that's not going to be good. Not a good hire. There are a number of people they interviewed that if that's who they would have hired as the new head coach, I would have come here on this podcast and I would have said, oh no. But if you've been listening, you know I said you have to hire one of three guys. I said this right after Vrabel was fired. That you got to hire one of three guys. You either got to hire Ben Johnson, you either got to hire Bobby Slowick, or you got to hire Brian Callahan. One of those three. And clearly, Brian Callahan emerged as the favorite. I mean, Ben Johnson never even interviewed with the Titans, so he clearly wasn't interested. Bobby Slowick did have an interview, but, didn't pan out with him. I think it's been clear that Brian Callahan was the guy that the Titans wanted. If they had hired, maybe Mike McDonald you could have talked me into, but if they had hired any of those other guys, it would have been a bad idea, in my opinion. But they did the right thing. They hired the guy they needed to hire. And let me tell you why they needed to hire this guy. Because the Tennessee Titans have never had a coach like Brian Callahan. Offensive-minded, young, progressive, offensive mind, student of the game. It's in his blood, it's in his family lineage, the NFL, and we all know about his dad. Okay. The Titans, I think I saw a tweet last night that says the Titans have not, this is the first time the Titans have hired a coach who's not a former player. First time since 1980. You want to know why the Titans have been stuck in this conservative, boring style of football for so long? Because we keep hiring guys who are former linebackers, former guards, former tight ends, who, of course, they want to play old school ball because that's what they played when they were in the league. It's all they know. And you know what? Mike Vrabel was a good coach, but Mike Vrabel was a by-the-books, traditional Tennessee Titans coach from the start. He was the most Titans coach ever. Former player, rough, tough, leader of men. We're going to run the football. We're going to try to beat you 13-10. That's the Titan way. Always has been as long as I've been alive. That's been how the Titans do it. We're going to beat you. We're going to drag you down into the mud and make you play ugly ball. Okay, well, that might have worked in 1975, but it's 2024, and that's not where we are anymore. Am I saying that style can't win you some games? Sure, it can win you some games, but it ain't going to win you enough. Look at the 4 teams that are left in the playoffs now. High-powered offenses. Weapons everywhere that are utilized regularly. You don't, I'm sorry, guys, you don't see any of these final 4 teams trotting guys like Nick Westbrook-Akine out onto the field to try to make plays for them. I ranted and I raved about this, and this is before Vrabel was fired. This was when the season was still going for the Titans. I said I'm sick of taking guys who were undrafted off the practice squad and trying to mold them into being something great. I want to get some guys who are just good. I want to get some guys in here who are not just hard workers, who are not just blue collar, come in and work hard. I know that's great. It's great to have guys like that, but you got to have some guys who just get it. And Vrabel, I made it clear last week, Vrabel inherited a team in Tennessee that had some of those guys. But over the years, there was a failure to develop players. There was a failure to build a good roster, and obviously John Robinson plays a big part in that as well. There was a failure to, and I want to say I appreciate Sportacular for the donation in the super chat on YouTube. I appreciate that more than you know. And the question they asked was, do you see Vrabel traits in Dan Campbell? Once Arthur Smith left, the offense was different here. What happens when Johnson leaves Detroit? That is a very good point, because I do see similarities between Dan Campbell and Mike Vrabel, but I will say I think Dan Campbell is a little more open to... I think Dan Campbell is a little less stubborn than Mike Vrabel. For those that are listening on Spotify or SoundCloud, I'm responding to a question from Sportacular who donated in the super chat here. They asked if I see Vrabel traits in Dan Campbell. I do see some, but I think Dan Campbell is not as stubborn as Mike Vrabel. They pointed out that what's going to happen when Ben Johnson leaves Detroit. Will Dan Campbell come back down to earth? Listen, I like Dan Campbell, and I like what's going on in Detroit. It's possible. I mean, Ben Johnson's done a great job as the OC. I expect Ben Johnson to be the next head coach of the Washington Commanders, personally. And we'll see. I mean, time will tell. But I do think Dan Campbell has a chance of making it work even once Ben Johnson leaves, because he's less stubborn than Vrabel. He knows that he needs to hire good coordinators. And that, I'm glad we brought that up, that, to me, was Vrabel's downfall, one of his biggest downfalls. And you've heard people talking about this. Vrabel was not very good at building a good coaching staff. He wasn't. He cared about things like loyalty to him, to guys he could trust. He wanted, that's what he wanted. He wanted a staff full of guys that he knew well. And that's fine as long as those guys are good. But at every turn, when it was time to hire somebody to come in, we always just elevated the in-house guy. We need a new defensive coordinator. Once Dean Pease left, well, let's just elevate Shane Bowen from, the guy who was already here. Let's just elevate him. Arthur Smith left. Let's just elevate Todd by God Downting. Give him 2 years. I've said, I don't have to tell you how that went. You all know. Then Todd by God Downting finally gets fired. And what do? We elevate Tim Kelly, who I don't think did a terrible job. But you mean to tell me there wasn't nobody else better out there? We just elevate Tim Kelly from within. When they wanted a new GM, what did Vrabel want to do? He wanted to elevate Ryan Cowden, the in-house guy. And we wonder why things weren't getting any better. The guy didn't want to bring in anybody new. He wanted to elevate from within. He wanted to bring on his buddies. And bringing in your buddies is fine if your buddies are good. But when the main thing you care about is loyalty and all of this stuff, it's like, no, we need guys that can coach. We need guys that are good. We don't just need, guys that you like. So I think that was one of, and I'm telling you, wherever Vrabel goes next, people are going to see that. When he's at a team, that gets more media attention than Tennessee, maybe people will recognize this stuff. Jesse Melton said situational play calling was suspect until we used trick plays. Think about over the years, how many times that we played not to lose. Think about how many times when we should have gone for it when we punted or tried a field goal. There's all sorts of stuff. But all of that to say, Brian Callahan, the new head coach of the Titans, is different than any head coach we've had. He's different than any head coach we've ever had because he's offensive minded. He's offensive minded. And look at the quarterback history of who this guy, Brian Callahan, has worked with. Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr when he was at his best, Joe Burrow, Peyton Manning, the sheriff himself, and Tim Tebow. Can we talk about Tim Tebow? This was the guy who worked with Tim Tebow when Tebow Mania was running wild in the NFL. Tim Tebow, let's be honest, I love Tim. He did not belong anywhere near an NFL football field with the way he was throwing and his mechanics. Yet, that dude ended up in the playoffs throwing a game-winning touchdown to Demaryius Thomas, God rest his soul. I mean, dude got everything out of Tim Tebow that you could possibly get in the NFL. He's got a good track record with quarterbacks, and while I hate that we're having to change offenses from year 1 to year 2 for Will Levis, I think in the long run, that's the best thing for Will Levis. Looking at Brian Callahan's history with quarterbacks, I like where he's been. I like who he's worked with. And to hear the fact that Peyton Manning and Matthew Stafford, these guys who are just studs, have a lot of good things to say about Brian Callahan. All of them do. Joe Burrow has good things to say about Brian Callahan. Everybody that's worked with him has a lot of good things to say. The Bengals, in Brian Callahan's time in Cincinnati, they have constantly been usually about number 15 or higher in terms of passing the ball the most of any team in the league. They're constantly in the top 15. I don't think the Titans are ever even above 25. So yeah, new day's coming for Tennessee. Some of you guys are talking about in the chat on Undisputed, which I did not watch. I seldomly ever do. I find it funny that Undisputed didn't give any credit to Brian Callahan for the QBs he's been with and not calling his own plays and not being. So I'm guessing on Undisputed they criticized the hire and said they didn't like it. Listen, I find it hilarious, and I think the national media is really telling on themselves that they don't know a lot about the Titans, don't care about the Titans, and the only thing they remotely cared about was that former Patriot Mike Vrabel was the coach. And now they don't know what to talk about now that he's not there anymore. if Mike, I'm starting to get mad. If Mike Vrabel's such a great coach, why is it looking like a realistic possibility that he may not even end up on a staff this year? Because you got to look. Was it 5 teams left looking for a coach? You got to think Belichick's going to get one of those. You got to think Harbaugh's going to get one of those. You got to think Ben Johnson's going to get one of those. Luke says that Undisputed's making it about race because we didn't interview Eric Bieniemy. I'm going to tip over this desk if what you're saying is true, Luke. Eric Bieniemy has not been interviewed by anyone. Maybe like one team has interviewed him, because Eric Bieniemy clearly has a reputation of being hard to work with. That's not a secret. There's a reason why 2 years ago, Eric Bieniemy was like one of the prime head coaching candidates, and now he's not anymore because he has a reputation of being hard to work with. And you're going to tell me they didn't interview Eric Bieniemy because of race? Okay, what about Aaron Glenn? Defensive coordinator of the Lions. Somebody check me on that. Eric Bieniemy is a black man. Brian Johnson, offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, interviewed him. Like, are you kidding me? David Shaw. Anybody? Can anybody tell me what's going on there? What a ridiculous thing to talk about on Undisputed, man. If that's what they talked about today, that's ridiculous. Anyway, Brian Callahan. His history of quarterbacks is great. His father, Bill Callahan, some of you may remember this, some of you that have been around a little bit, like me, watching this team. Bill Callahan was the coach of the Oakland Raiders when they beat the Tennessee Titans in 2003 in the AFC Championship game. Rich Gannon was quarterback of that Raiders team. I believe Jerry Rice was on that Raiders team. You know what I'm saying? So, and somebody had a good point in the chat. The Titans also interviewed Antonio Pierce, who is also a black man. They said that Richard Sherman on Undisputed mentioned that Brian Callahan wasn't even the best available and didn't have the resume. Mentioned that Ben Johnson is out there. Ben Johnson's white. If we had hired Ben Johnson, oh my gosh, I can't even believe that that's what they're choosing to talk about on Undisputed today. Yeah, and so Bill Callahan is obviously, he's been an offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns and one of the best offensive line coaches in the league. And a lot of speculation that he would want to come coach with his son in Nashville, to which I say, dear God, please. If any offensive line, please, God, if any offensive line needs Bill Callahan, shoot, bring Mike Munchak too. Bring them both. Bring them all. I mean, we need all the help we can get on this offensive line. We need everybody. We need all hands on deck. The speculation today is that Bill Callahan will most likely be on Brian Callahan's staff, to which I say, welcome. Welcome. Please help us. We need help on this offensive line. Obviously, we can expect there are going to be some new names on this offensive line. We better be. But also, I mean, I look forward to the rest of this offseason, the roster building. You have to now look at it through a different lens, because now you've got Callahan in here, and he's going to have a vision for what he wants. I can't wait to see how guys like Tyjae Spears and Will Levis develop under this guy. I mean, I'm curious to see what becomes of guys like Treylon Burks, because we've talked about the possibility of trading him, but is this a guy that Callahan can help him? We'll see. There's a lot of talk about T. Higgins. I would still be surprised. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but I would still be surprised if T. Higgins, just because I think the Bengals are going to want to keep him. But, I mean, who knows? T. Higgins, obviously a Bengal himself, knows Brian Callahan well. I'm so excited about this hire. I really am. And I wouldn't be excited about just anybody, but I'm excited about Brian Callahan because we've never had a coach like this. This is the first time, maybe ever, but especially within the last 10 years, that I feel like we're actually heading in a new direction. You know, I feel like we're heading somewhere different than where we've been. And that encourages me about ownership, Amy Adams Strunk. It encourages me about them because I feel like they looked at the situation and said, okay, what we've been doing is not working. This old school, stuck in the past, mentality that we've had is clearly not getting us where we need to be. And if I have to make an aggressive move to get us there, I will. I can't believe the love affair that the media has with Mike Vrabel. They don't, I mean, it's just clear that they haven't watched the Titans and they don't know what's been going on in Nashville, because if they did, people would not be so shocked by what's happened. The Titans have been one of the worst offenses I've ever seen for the last 2 seasons. I mean, they really make me want to bang my head against the wall. And like I said earlier, the failure to build a good coaching staff, the failure to look to the outside and bring in coaches with different philosophies, with different ideas of where to take the offense, the failure to realize that, maybe we need some new mindsets in here from Vrabel. I think that was his downfall. I mean, you got to get good coordinators in here and not just elevate the in-house guy because you know them the best. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's something you're not going to have to worry about with Callahan. I think that, it's going to be a breath of fresh air. And you know what? If I'm wrong, if Callahan ends up being horrible, I have no problem admitting I'm wrong, but I have a good feeling about this guy. I have a good feeling about what he brings to the table. I have a good feeling about the fact that this is a different kind of coach than we've ever seen in Tennessee. A very different kind of coach. Not just some former linebacker or tight end who's going to come in here and try to play old school ball. It's somebody who's going to come in here and actually try to make this offense look modern. God forbid. Now, I do look ahead to, offensive coordinators. I've heard Thomas Brown's name thrown around. A lot of people kind of turn up their nose at that because he was the offensive coordinator for the Carolina Panthers this past year, and the Panthers were obviously horrible. But if you look at his track record, I mean, he's been on McVay's staff. He's been around and done some good stuff, and obviously I think Callahan's going to be calling the offensive plays no matter who the OC is. Defensive coordinator, that's the one I'm really zeroing in on, because knowing that Callahan is an offensive-minded guy, it really makes me curious to see who the defensive coordinator is going to be, because you're going to need somebody good in that role, because knowing Callahan is kind of an offensive guy, or offense first, rather. I'm curious to see defensive coordinator. I'm curious to see what kind of names come out. I mean, I even thought about, you think about who got second interviews with the Titans. It was Callahan, Thomas Brown, thinking of Antonio Pierce, Thomas Brown, and because I was trying to think, Antonio Pierce did not get a second interview. I don't think David Shaw did either. So it was Brian Callahan, Thomas Brown, and Dan Quinn. Those are the only people. Well, Dan Quinn never actually got his second interview because it never, they already hired Callahan. But it makes me wonder, bringing Thomas Brown in for a second interview, could that now kind of translate over to an offensive coordinator situation where he can come in? Because I don't know what situation, because Carolina, obviously, they're going to hire a new coach. They're going to hire a new, they just hired a new GM. And so I don't know if Thomas Brown is even a thought to be on that staff. You never know. But he's probably going to be available. So that would be a obvious choice for offensive coordinator. As far as defensive coordinator, you got to wonder, are they going to try to take a swing at Dan Quinn to be the defensive coordinator? I mean, they were toying with the idea of bringing him in for a second interview, and obviously Dallas, they're sticking with McCarthy as their head coach. Um, I don't know why Dan Quinn would leave his job in Dallas to come to Nashville. Also, you got to keep in mind Dan Quinn very well may be the next head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. There's still 5 teams looking for a new head coach, and Dan Quinn is a possibility for those teams. So I don't know, but I mean, you just wonder if the chips fell in the right way. Could they try to take a swing at Dan Quinn? I don't know. But either way, I have a lot of faith that Callahan is going to build a good staff. I have a lot of faith that this is the right move. And there are some who are hesitant to say that because they don't want to be let down, and I get it. But I'm excited about the fact that we are at least attempting to go a new direction as a team and as an organization. I've said it before. There's a new stadium being built soon. And you don't want to have a crappy team. When that new stadium gets here, you've got to start figuring it out now. And I really love the idea of Callahan working with Will Levis. And worth noting, Peyton Manning, who was very high on Brian Callahan, was also very high on Will Levis. He was high on both of them. So, hey, let's hire Peyton coming to be the quarterback's coach. Just kidding. Only a little. I'm only kidding a little about that. But I am the most excited I've been in a while. Vrabel was a good coach, but I had grown weary of the old school mentality. We got to establish the run. We got to establish the run. We got to establish the run. I had grown weary of seeing players that played for us going other places and thriving. I had grown sick of the gotta coach better, gotta play better, and the way that things were going. I had just grown tired of it, and it kind of it was casting a cloud over even things you wanted for the future of the team. I remember the first game when they played Houston, which was apparently the game where Amy Adams Strunk probably decided she was going to fire Vrabel. I remember after that game, I came on the podcast and I was like, I'm worried about the future of this team because the game plan for that game was so horrible that it was like, I don't even know if I can get excited about bringing new guys in and all this stuff, because if we're capable of coming up with a game plan this bad, then I find it hard to even have hope. And so now I don't have to deal with that anymore. Hopefully. Now it's like, okay, so Amy saw it, realized it, and did something about it. And I think it's funny that I've seen so many Colts and Jaguars and Texans fans criticizing this, saying that they think it's stupid. Like, yeah, I would hate it if I were you guys too, because if I were you guys, I would have wanted the Titans to stick with a guy who was 6-17 since November of 2022 as well. Like, if I was a Colts, Jags, or Texans fan, I would have been like, I hope they stick with Vrabel. Like, I would have been that way if I were them. But, I'm excited. I'm excited because with what's going on in Houston, you got C.J. Stroud, you got a lot of young, great talent on that team. The Colts looked better than anybody thought they would be this year. The Jaguars are going to try to put this thing back together and come back stronger next year. You've got young quarterbacks in your own division who are going to be around for a while, and you can't afford to get behind the 8 ball at this point. So you've got to be aggressive, and you've got to make decisions that some are going to criticize. And it's very easy, and this is worth noting in the chat, we've got a Bengals fan saying that as a Bengals fan, congrats, you got a great coach. That's encouraging. And there's been a lot of reports coming out of Cincinnati, wishing this guy the best because they say he's a great coach. And all the coaches in Cincinnati have echoed how great this guy is. This would have been a bad time to get behind the 8 ball with all of these other teams in your division. The time was past to try to come out here and just keep doing what we were doing when it was clear everything around us was progressing. And I can't believe there are some reports now saying that Mike Vrabel may be left out of this coaching cycle. And it's like, if he's so irreplaceable and great, can you please tell me why it's a strong possibility that he may not even get hired? Yet he's irreplaceable and the greatest coach in the world. I saw somebody on Twitter yesterday. This is an actual quote. They said, I can't believe the Titans fired the third best coach in the league for Brian Callahan. The third best coach in the league. I just don't know if people have been watching the same team. Like, have you been watching the same Titans that I have? Because clearly not. And that's the thing you got to remember. The national media that are going to talk about this and they're going to hate the hire of Callahan and they're going to, act like firing Vrabel was the dumbest thing they've ever seen. They don't know anything about the Titans. They haven't watched the Titans. And I'm getting mad. Those same people, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, if Vrabel was so great as the Titans head coach, national media, then tell me this. Who were you picking to win the AFC South next year? Because it sure wasn't going to be the Titans. They were going to spend the next 6 months on the air falling all over themselves talking about how great Houston's going to be, how great Indianapolis is going to be, how Jacksonville's going to rebound and come back stronger than ever. They're going to sit in their seats and they're going to fall all over themselves talking about how great those three teams are going to be. Nick Wright on whatever network he's on, looking like Big Bird. He may as well be on Sesame Street. He's already been on Twitter talking about, hey, the AFC South might actually be pretty good next year because the Jags have Trevor and the Colts are going to get Anthony Richardson back. Never mind, Anthony Richardson has only taken like 5 snaps in the NFL. And then the Texans have C.J. Stroud. He didn't even mention the Titans. So you to tell me that the Titans are going to be so good with Vrabel that they're an afterthought. It's like they don't even exist. So now maybe they're mad because they actually have to think about who's on the Titans roster and they actually have to care about what's going on over there. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But I'm happy today. I'm thrilled with the news. I'm thrilled with the hire. I'm excited. I'm even more excited now to see what becomes of this offseason. I'm excited about the draft. And you got to think about it in context of last offseason we hired Rand Carthon, who brought in a totally new progressive style to the front office. And it's not hard to see how Vrabel really didn't fit into that really well. So now we've brought in a head coach that will fit into that. We've brought in a head coach who will partner up with Rand Carthon and take this organization somewhere that hopefully it ain't ever been before. Like I said, look at the 4 teams that are left. Okay, high-powered offenses, weapons all over the place. Like, that's what it has to be. If you're actually going to contend, that's what it has to be. And so I am just so excited about this. I'm so excited, even more excited now about the draft to see what direction we go there. I'm excited about free agency. I'm excited about trades. I'm excited about how much money we have to work with. I'm excited. Like I said, I hate that Will Levis is having to change offenses from year 1 to year 2. But in the long run, I'm excited for Will. I'm excited for Tyjae Spears. I'm excited about fixing this offensive line, hopefully with Bill Callahan kind of at the helm of that. I'm excited to see what kind of staff is built. I'm excited for Brian Callahan's first opening press conference, which will probably be later this week or something, once they officially announce he's the coach. I'm excited about all of this, and I wasn't a few weeks ago. I wasn't a few weeks ago. Like, maybe we'll draft somebody. Because I need you guys to understand something. I know we've been subjected to this, but I need you to understand it's not normal. Gear up for this now. It's not normal to have a team full of guys who went undrafted and were picked up off a practice squad. That's not normal. Not normal. I have said it time and time again. Nobody played more undrafted guys this year than the Tennessee Titans. Not even close. Nobody started more undrafted guys this year than the Tennessee Titans. Not even close. That's not normal. That's not normal. The way the Tennessee Titans have been doing things, even when they were good, the way the Tennessee Titans have been doing things is not normal. Having 75% of the roster on IR every year is not normal. That's another thing I'm excited about, is hopefully we can figure out this injury thing and what happens if the injuries get better. I know injuries happen. I know guys are going to get hurt and guys are going to miss games. We see that all across the league. But look at what the Titans have now dealt with for 3 straight years. Everybody on IR. Everybody missing weeks at a time. What happens if that stops? What happens if that stops now and it's much better? I don't know how you don't look at the old staff and the old coaches and be like, what were you doing? It's not normal to have 75% of the roster on IR every year. That's not normal. It's not, oh boy, it's not normal to keep running the ball up the middle on 1st and 10 every drive, even though it's clearly not working, and you just keep doing it anyway. That's not normal. That's not what everyone else in the league is doing. And all of the national media that have sat there and gushed over Mike Vrabel, because they don't like Mike Vrabel, they like the idea of Mike Vrabel. They like more so than him, they like their idea of him. Former Patriot. He was there when the dynasty was in full swing. He's a former player that played close enough to now. He played not too long ago enough that we remember watching him. We remember watching him catch the touchdown in the Super Bowl. We remember watching him make tackles. And now he's a coach. And he's tough. And he knows the rules. And he's funny. We don't love Vrabel. We just love the idea of Vrabel. We love the idea. It's why they love DeMeco Ryans. And he's done a great job in Houston, but they love these players who we remember watching who are now coaching, and it's so fun. And they have this personality, and they get out there, and they're a leader of men. It feels like, you know, when you used to have a Walkman and you'd have the CD in it and it would start skipping. That's what the media sounds like when they talk about Vrabel. Leader of men. I want a leader of wins. You can be a leader of men if you want to, and that's great. I want a leader of wins. You can be a leader of men all you want, but if we're 6-11, I don't give a crap. Who you leading? Who you leading? And where are you leading them? Leader of men. Because all we've been led to was a 7-game losing streak where we lost the division last year. Leader of men. 6-11. Over half the roster on IR for 3 years in a row. A roster full of guys that went undrafted and were pulled up off a practice squad. You can be a leader of men if you want to, but this ain't a construction site. This is an NFL football team. We need a leader of wins. You can be funny. You can get out there and put on pads and hit the guys. You can be a former player if you want to, but if you ain't winning, you ain't staying. And I don't know why the rules are different for Mike Vrabel than anybody else when it comes to the national media. But as I just said, what we have been experiencing as Titans fans for these last few years is not normal. This is not how it is supposed to be. There's a reason why I understand Todd, by God, Downting did end up on the Jets coaching staff, but nobody was falling all over themselves to hire Todd Downing as their offensive coordinator. You want to know why? Because nobody else wanted him except for Vrabel and the Titans. Nobody is falling all over themselves to hire Tim Kelly. And I liked Tim, and I thought he did a good job. But there's a reason why, because we keep well, not anymore, but we kept employing guys that were mid at best, over and over. Is John Robinson a GM anywhere else in the league? No. And I know that Vrabel wasn't the one who hired him, but you know what I mean. Look at the players that we have just continued to trot out on the field every week. Hard workers, yes. God bless them for all they've given. But like Nick Westbrook-Akine, who, God bless him. I'm not even saying there's not a place for him on the team. He's a good special teams player, whatever. But Nick Westbrook-Akine tried to test out free agency last offseason. It lasted about a day before he just came back to Tennessee. You want to know why? Because nobody else wanted him. Nobody else wanted him. We're the only ones. Vrabel was the only one that was like, oh, we got to have him on the punt team. We got to have him running drag routes. We got to have him trying to help us get down the field. Like, what? That's not normal. What about what Vrabel said about Kyle Phillips? What about what he said about Kyle Phillips toward the end of the season when Kyle Phillips was a healthy scratch week after week after week, and Vrabel's explanation was, well, it's just hard to find a spot for him on the active roster when he's not returning punts. What? Can somebody please? Because I know I am just a lowly YouTuber and podcast host. Can somebody tell me, can somebody translate what that even means? You can't put your wide receiver on the active roster because he's not returning punts? You act like you have this great wide receiving group and he's just the odd man out. Bro, we got a bunch of bums out here. I shouldn't say that. They're not bums. I love them to death. But it's like, what? Luke brings up Josh Reynolds, who had a touchdown the other day in the divisional round of the playoffs. Do you realize Josh Reynolds was on the Tennessee Titans the year we went 12-5? For like the first 6 or 7 games, he was a Titan, and we let him go because we couldn't figure out a way to get him the ball. He just wasn't a big factor in our offense. Here's the theme of the day. Let me say it again. That's not normal. I'm not saying Josh Reynolds is Randy Moss. I'm not saying he's Jerry Rice. I'm not saying he's A.J. Brown. But you mean to tell me you can't find a place on the you can't find a place on the roster for Josh Reynolds? A guy who is more than capable of playing a significant role. We see it in Detroit all the time. It's not normal. That's not normal. Who else? David Long? David Long, who we let go, and Vrabel pretty much threw him under the bus. You remember this? Well, he's a repeat offender. He's a repeat offender, keeps getting hurt, tried to make it about him. Well, now he's been in Miami. I know Miami season ended bad for them, but like my guy, David Long, had a great season. He was one of the best run-stopping linebackers in the league this year and stayed healthy for pretty much the entire year. But here, we couldn't find a place for him. We're just cuddling with him. That's not normal. That's not normal. While the national media is sitting over here just clutching their pearls because the great Mike Vrabel was let go, that's not normal. And all of this to say, like, there are some good things Vrabel brought to the table. I liked Vrabel overall, but his inability to recognize a problem and fix it without just elevating some guy that he already knew, Like, and also, you talk about things like the A.J. Brown trade. How long have I been saying on this podcast? John Robinson is culprit number one. He's the number one reason it happened. But are we really going to act like Vrabel was innocent? I mean, I know there was the clip of him looking unhappy, but he was also the same guy who afterwards said, I'm fine with how this went down. Now, what else was he supposed to say? But still. Do you realize when you talk about guys playing wide receiver, the number one issue should not be how well can they block. That's not normal. Do you know how often we've heard this for the last however many years? We keep guys on the roster because, I mean, listen, if you're a wide receiver and you can make good blocks downfield, that's great. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But, like, do you understand that the number one thing, I feel like I'm teaching a kindergarten class, the number one thing that wide receivers do is catch! Get open and catch the ball. We're worried about having a gunner on the punt team. We're worried about run blocking. I want some guys that can catch. I want some guys that can make plays down the field. I want some guys who can go up and get the ball at its highest point. I want some guys who can run past defenders and get open and catch a long ball. Why don't give a crap if they can run block? If they can run block, that's a bonus. But like, why are we worried about what? It's not normal. Not normal. You draft Treylon Burks in the first round a couple years ago, and we seem unconcerned with even trying to get him the ball. That's not normal. In the Miami game, people wonder why he had no catches. They broke down the film. It's because he's running a bunch of routes just to try to clear everybody out so that somebody else can catch the ball. It's a first-round draft pick. That's not normal. We've been subjected to this. You want to know what it's like? You know it's like when like your friend has been in a toxic relationship and they get out of the toxic relationship and then they fully start to realize all the crap they put up with. They're like, what was I thinking? That's what we should feel right now. We have put up with some nonsense. There's been some good times. I'm not going to lie. There's been some good times. But we have put up with some nonsense around here and tried to justify it. This is nonsense. Lest we forget, the Tennessee Titans was Mike Vrabel's first head coaching job ever. So you're going to tell me that it's not possible that he was in over his head and when it came to some certain things? The guy wanted control of the roster because he felt like he had earned it. He ended last season on a 7-game losing streak. You earned control of the roster? I mean, that would be like, I don't even know. If I don't know how to word this. It would be like if I gave my wife a turd on a plate and was like, give me a kiss now, I earned it. It's stupidity! Here, honey, I threw an onion on a plate for you for dinner. Give me a kiss now. I feel like I've earned it. I've lost my mind here today. I came on here to talk about Callahan, and I've ended up, but it stems from the Callahan stuff. You've already talked about the media who are criticizing Callahan because, they let Vrabel go for that. Like, have you been watching? Because I have. I've watched it all. I've watched it all unfold. And I know better than your simple little talking points. You just want to real quick say, Vrabel's the greatest and the guy they hired sucks. Now let's get back to talking about the Cowboys again. That's what they want to do. Let's get back to Where's Taylor Swift's press box? Enough about the Titans and their new head coach. Travis Kelce, what's his Valentine's Day plans for him and Taylor Swift? I'm sick of it, man. That's why I don't watch shows like that anymore. Brian Callahan is the right hire. He's the right guy. He's the right guy for the job. And if I end up being wrong, I ain't got a problem saying I'm wrong. I'll be upset because I want him to be great. But I'm excited. I'm excited about the future of the team, and if you're a Titans fan, you should be too. You should be too. Because we have had the same type of coach for the last 30 years. And we're finally doing something different. We're finally bringing in somebody different. We have gotten out of our rut, and we're bringing in somebody who can actually take the team in a new direction. With an offense that actually looks like it belongs in 2024. With an offense full of wide receivers who aren't just there to block and play gunner on the punt team. It's ridiculous. Anyway, the new day has dawned. I'm excited to see where it goes. I'm excited about the offseason, and come August, I'll be especially excited about, the preseason, regular season. I'm excited about all of it. I'm excited to see where we go. What's that song from Frozen 2? Into the unknown. It feels like we're going into the unknown. We're in uncharted territory. Because that's why I didn't want to hire Dan Quinn. Because Dan Quinn would have been a typical Titans guy. Aaron Glenn would have been a typical Titans guy. Antonio Pierce would have been a typical Titans guy. Nothing wrong with any of those guys, but we needed something different. We needed something new, and we got it. We got it. I'll be back Friday, episode 78. Talk about more of this. I'm sure there'll be more news between now and then. God bless you guys for tuning into this podcast today. Brian Callahan, new head coach of the Tennessee Titans, and the future is now. Future's now. See you on the Two-Tone By God pod. Staying way too high on the wins, way too low on the losses. God bless you, everybody. Tighten up. Bye.
Wherever you wanna be, feel free to dance, feel free to sing, just feel free. Feels like the world is picking on ya, feels like it's picking on me, but trying to please everybody, that ain't no way to be. So many people try to get you to fit their mold. I think it's time for a change.